Monday, November 18th, 2024. And I'm so glad that you are able to join us for our Attaining Your Personal Best show. We've changed the time from being 8 p.m. on Monday to 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So it'll take us some time to get some traction on our new time. But nevertheless, we're going to go ahead and proceed. We have a wonderful guest who's going to join us today, and that is Dr. Craig Piso, who's a licensed psychologist for way more years than he looks. So without further ado, I'll have Dr. Craig Piso join us. So Craig, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, Nat. Really good to see you again.
Same here, same here. So we were talking by text about what do we want to talk about today and what's the focus? And I thought we'd just have a conversation because there's no one I know better than yourself with helping people to attain their personal best. And you've been doing it for many years, both for young people, for older people, and for organizations. So Craig, why don't you tell those who may not know who you are, just a little bit about your background, and feel free to direct them at any point during our conversation to your website so they know where they could go to find some more information about you as well. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I've been a psychologist forever, long time, actually 45 years now. And it's been varied, a lot of different, venues and situations and populations with whom I've worked. But I'd say there's been a consistent theme from the very beginning. I've gotten a certain joy in doing what you now do. The theme of this program is attaining your personal best. And to the degree that I've contributed that with people, whether it's, like I said, a child, adolescent, adult, family, group, company, practice, organization, and the like, it's all been the same source of fulfillment. So I won't belabor all the detail of how I've done that, but I think that's an important overarching theme that makes you and I kindred spirits. This sense of, we're only here for about 100 years, or most of us for less. We have an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others, especially when, like yourself, you're well educated, well trained, and you have rich, enlivening experience that you can share. And then when you bring those gifts and knowledge and even wisdom to bear in a relationship, and you see that there's this influence that you have, you make an impact, you empower and support people, you help bring out their personal best. That to me is about as good as it gets professionally, maybe personally as well.
And one of the things that I see now, Craig, is, with the world events that have happened, is there are a lot of people that are very scared about how things are going to go. And there's other people that are really very excited about how things are looking. What are some advice that you have for people as they look at all that's going on around them to help them stabilize themselves? Because I think often we want to try to do for others what we haven't done for ourselves. And I think we have to start with our own homework and then begin to extrapolate it from there. But what are some thoughts, comments, advice that you have for people as they go into a period that may be a little concerning or very exciting for them?
Well, probably the most important thing is to be humble, to humbly accept that we don't really change this world nearly as much as we'd like to. And to practice a kind of serenity prayer then, or that to be able to say, look, help me change the things I can, which is mostly in my wheelhouse, my immediate circle, me, working on me. Let's work on me, and I'll come back to that in a second. Help me accept, part 2 of the prayer, help me accept the things I cannot change, which is the rest of planet Earth and the cosmos. So we'd love to change politics and global war and global warming, and we'd love to change those things. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try to make impact there, but to lack the humility, which is the reality-based judgment, to accept that we don't make a heck of a big difference. Looking outside ourselves at issues and problems. The serenity comes from having the wisdom to know the difference between the battles we can fight and the battles we're never going to win and should not fight. So getting back into the wheelhouse, so to speak, of understanding some principles. One is what we focus on tends to expand. We focus on problems. We focus on our current president-elect and what we expect he'll do wrong. We're already having anticipatory anxiety, dread, depression, and a feeling of powerlessness. If we instead, like the other half of the country who voted for him, believe that there's the potential for good, and what we focus on is, that potential and what he's actually doing or has done that's good, and probably will be doing some good things at least, that focus will expand. So we get to choose. Will our focus lead to expanded negativity or expanded positivity? We get to select, the object of our focus. And then the last thing I'd say there is, we can do a psychological lens replacement. The same way you could get, cataracts removed and have a lens implanted to clear your vision physically, we can do a psychological lens replacement. That is, the way we look at things enables us to perceive things a certain way. And our perception defines our reality. You want to change your reality and your quality of life, change your perception, change the lens through which you see things. So if you look optimistically, you feel better than if you look pessimistically. If you look with an eye toward what's good or right or excellent or beautiful, etc., you'll find those things, and that focus expands, and that defines your perception of the world. And the opposite is also true. So while I'm not talking about changing the world, here's an example. I bought these glasses so that I could see the world through rose-colored glasses. Does it mean the world is actually rose-colored? Oh, hell no. But it looks prettier when I put these on. Wow. And I can do a psychological lens replacement as well.
Sure. And Craig, I think that's such a good point. I was sharing with some friends this morning a video that I came across on Facebook, and it was Della Reese having a conversation with a host in front of a group. So I don't know if you've ever seen the 92nd Street Y. They have a lecture series, and it was set up that way where there are two people on the stage and then people in the audience. And they were asking Miss Reese to talk about her experience in the early days of being a performer. And she talked about Ed Sullivan. She said that some people made in front of him and talked about, the way he spoke, and that his background really wasn't originally aligned. I think originally he was a sports broadcaster. But she talked about how she used to travel between Tahoe, Vegas, and another Arizona town, and that one night they forgot to serve her dinner, her hamburger, and Ed Sullivan happened to walk upon the situation and corrected it in 5 minutes. She had been waiting for like an hour and a half for the food, but he corrected it in 5 minutes. But then they struck up a friendship, and he would take her through the front door of restaurants where at that point she was supposed to go through the back door, and that he opened up places for her. And at that point of the conversation, she chose to talk about the one man who made the difference in her life, as opposed to the thousands who inconvenienced her and made her feel uncomfortable. And I think it goes back to what you determine the narrative. You're given the stage, and they're going to ask you a question, and you can go down that route of that question, or you could choose to say, hey, I believe every person can have an impact and can make a difference, and here's how one person used their privilege and power to empower me. And she talked about going into restaurants, and they would sit in the center of the restaurant, and people would be asking for their bill and leaving the restaurant. But Ed Sullivan and his wife and her, they enjoyed their meal, and they stayed the course. And look at where we are. And what I wrote down on a piece of paper here is where do you eat now, and how long did your hamburger? I never had to deal with what Miss Reese had to deal with, and so sometimes we don't see the progress we're making, but it's happening. And again, lots of times it's one person who's choosing to to stand up and make a difference. So again, I think that lens and that perspective that a person have, I couldn't agree with you more, Craig. It's so important.
Yeah, I was just reading an article coincidentally this morning in the Pennsylvania Psychologist, and the theme of the edition was about beautyism, which has become a kind of a current popular trend for research to understand the social psychological impact of how beauty affects people. It can bias people, at least unconsciously, in, say, hiring and promoting practices, as well as in your personal relationships, of course, in the same way that racism and ageism and other biases and prejudices are powerful drivers of social forces, as well as the impact it has on individuals if we let it.
Mm.
So if, for example, the person who doesn't get picked for the softball team in phys ed class, or the one who isn't chosen to be first as a contestant for the homecoming queen or king competition, if they internalize, they take to heart, they take it too personally, this idea that I'm less than, or I'm not pretty, I'm not attractive, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not deserving of getting world-class service, getting my hamburger on time, or sitting at the choice table in the center of the restaurant. That's a tragedy. But I love the point that you started off with, that she said, there's a bazillion people out there who probably treated her with racial prejudice up to that point. And she might have concluded erroneously, well, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. But then Ed Sullivan comes along and says, well, wait a minute. All we need is an exception of one, a sample case of one, to say it doesn't have to be this way. And that's a game changer, to believe in the possibility that while it might be predominant, it's not exclusive. It's not dominant unless we allow it to be. Sure. All we need is the exception to give us an opening, a window opening of possibility.
Sure. One of the things, Craig, that I'd like for you to talk about as well is, I think often we now share with some of the millennials and other generations that you're going to have a series of different jobs, and it's not like it used to be, and blah, blah, blah. But I think you are, as a person who's been in the workforce for as many years as you have, I think you were doing that well before the millennials have been doing it. And I've watched you transition from lots of different kinds of work over the 20 or 30 years that I've known you as you've sought to attain your personal best, and including becoming an organizational development, advisor for a practice that isn't really something that would be normally aligned with what you're. So could you talk a little bit about, how your life career has morphed and changed, and it's not like you haven't gone through some of the things that other people have gone through, but I've watched you, turn lemons into lemonade.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that. That's for me an intriguing question, even through today. I reflect on that question and how I've answered it. Up until age 40, I was trying to live what I would call the American dream. I was raised with old-fashioned blue-collar cultural values, born and raised in Pittsburgh. And we had this idea that, the world is your oyster. Just reach for the brass ring, go for it. There's nobody standing in your way but yourself. And I had a lot of privilege and opportunity given to me. And I made good use of it, I thought, until I got into the corporate world. And early on, I discovered that I was so naive and too trusting, and I spoke my mind. I was assertive. I would point out, what was wrong, and believing that I was right and speaking truth to power would empower me. Well, it led to my political professional undoing time and time again. And then I went through personal problems including a painful divorce that ended at age 40. And I got really depressed, and I made a huge pivot. And the pivot was, instead of having a plan, like, well, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to carve out this career path, or I'm going to be this executive, and I'm going to, raise my family this way, and blah, blah, blah. Instead of having a plan, I said, let go and let God at that point. I said, it's not that I gave up. What I said to myself was, I apparently am not very good at planning. Everything has fallen apart that I've planned to do. So my new plan is to have no plan. That is, all I'm going to do is work on me. I'm going to be a self-improvement project. I'm going to become knowledgeable. And I started reading and reading and reading more than I'd ever read in graduate school, and going to conferences and listening to the world-class speakers and studying things that I thought would make me valuable. Not knowing, that is, not having a specific plan about where I'd go and what I'd do and how I'd make a living. But I remember my father saying, when opportunity knocks, answer the door. Well, I thought, well, I can't answer the door if I'm not ready. So I got to get ready. So I spent years working on me. And I still do, by the way. Mm-hmm. And so when opportunities came along and the knock came at the door, what do they say? Fortune favors the prepared, something to that effect. I was prepared, and I would make the leap of faith into things that I really knew nothing about. Nothing. Working for you was a great example. I had never worked in, group home children's services. And yet I confidently said, oh, I could do this. And you helped me experience the wake-up call that, it wasn't quite as easy as I thought it might be, but I did learn, and I did demonstrate some competence toward the end. Oh, wow. And that's been my path, is just let God direct my steps and get me ready to answer the door.
Sorry. If I could just take what I heard you say and just give you I think if I heard you correctly, you seem like you went from plans to say, you know what, I got to work on my practice. I have to work on what I do, and that'll take the practices that I have going in my life is going to really develop the plans for me, because I'm going to be, as you said, I'm going to be ready because I've done the homework. I've improved my practice, and then my plans are going to take care of them. And I would argue that your plans were probably bigger than you could have ever imagined once you started working on your practices.
Yeah. There's an old adage that says, if you want to know that there's a God, just go ahead and make your own plan. So I discovered that if I was open, that I prayed and reflected daily on the idea of, I want to be in shape. I want to be useful. I want to be an instrument of God's will. And I'll go where you send me. And I'll develop the courage and commitment to do my best, even though I never did it before. And it has taken me to the ends of the earth, literally, to do things I never dreamed of. But I didn't have to dream of it. God had a plan for me.
Wow. I think that's so very powerful. And I know that not too long ago you had a little challenge, but again, no one would know it today because you just moved on from it. And so I think you would be the first to say it hasn't been easy, but it's been doable. And it's something I can handle. I'm sorry, Craig, go ahead.
Well, I mean, you've opened that door a little bit. I'd like to comment about that. Almost 4 months ago, July 31st, a day that will live in infamy for me, I had an accident at my cabin in West Virginia. I was by myself. I fell 7 feet straight down on my back from a ladder there. And I'd never broken a bone in my body up to that point at age 70. And yet I had 14 fractures from that fall, and a collapsed lung, a concussion with a brain bleed. I ended up in the intensive care unit, and they told me that I was very fortunate not to have died from my multiple traumatic injuries. Or in some sense, could have been worse. I could have been permanently disabled, as in a broken neck, a quadriplegic, A man admitted down the hall from me on day 2 in the hospital was a quadriplegic from an accident in his 30s. Or I could have had severe brain damage and been, in a vegetative kind of state. And so I asked myself again, at age 70, what's going on here? Is this a diversion from, God's plan for me? Or is this just another chapter of how I've been blessed? And I absolutely am convinced that this was part of the plan and another blessing in disguise. I've made all the doctors tell me I've made a remarkable recovery. I'm about 90% back to my physical self. And I feel better about my life than ever before. Wow. So I found this quote, and I wanted to share it with you from a book that was written back in 1966 by Daniel Keyes called Flowers for Algernon. And that was the basis of a movie made in 1968 called Charlie, starring Cliff Robertson, who was given the Academy Award that year for Best Actor. The long story short is that he was a mentally challenged individual, an IQ of, I believe, 69. He was subjected to the surgical procedure that they had done originally on a mouse named Algernon. And the mouse became super smart, and Charlie in this fictional movie became a genius. He tripled his IQ to over 200 and could answer questions as a genius. And one of the quotes I took from the book that I just wanted to share that resonated with me after my accident, it goes like this. It says, "Although we know the end of the maze holds death, and it is something I have not always known. Not long ago, the adolescent in me thought death could happen only to other people. I now see that the path I choose through that maze makes me what I am. I am not only a thing, but also a way of being, one of many ways. And knowing the paths I have followed and the ones left to take will help me understand what I am becoming." And I think that's important, that we reflect on where we've been, what choices we've made, what paths we've taken. But this fall that I had and the humbling experience of being broken literally and I had a brush with death, where I finally realized I am, in spite of my past, with this sense of being, invincible, I am vulnerable. I will die one day. And I got the wake-up call with maybe 30 years left. God knows how much in reality, but I will not waste another day.
Wow. And I think that's a powerful point as we get ready to wrap up our time together, is just to take that admonition, not to waste another day, and no more. And I also think along those same lines, Craig, I try to share with people, I don't think there's a thing called failure. I think there's degrees of success, but you've always been successful. I think the question is, do you want a higher level that you really haven't failed, because you're making an effort to try. And so I think I believe, again, changing that perspective to realize I'm always successful. The question is to what degree, I think then gives you room for improvement. But if you say, okay, fine, I've been a failure, you just put that in the other column, we discard it, and it doesn't allow us to learn. And I think what you've done, and I've watched you do it, is turn those, things that have been somewhat successful to things that have been largely successful, and taking it all, it's all good. It's all for something. And trying to figure out what you can, has been part of your attaining your personal best and part of your life crusade. And again, as you said, prayerfully, we have a lot more years to go and to impact, and especially now that we're wiser. And that's why it was so important, Craig, for us to get some time together. And so this is just in one more platform among your many platforms to share that wisdom that you've garnered over time with as many people that are willing to listen.
And I just want to close by thanking you, Nat. You have for 20 to 25 years been an inspiration to me. You've been an accountability partner. You've been a source of knowledge and wisdom and opportunity, a resource a wonderful human being, and I'm indebted to you.
Yeah, same here, same here. And I always say to people is that it's one thing to offer, another thing to accept. And I think for both of us, we've had a reciprocal. There's times that you've offered, I've accepted, and vice versa. I think that's so important, is to be open, and to give things an opportunity. But people also remind me, you can't do this with everybody. Everybody's not Craig Piso that's gonna, not be in competition with you and be able to support. So I realize I've been very blessed to have people in my life that are able to offer advice. And I remember one time when I was talking to you about an opportunity to take over the operations of another nonprofit, and your only advice is just be genuine, just be authentic, just be truthful, and the rest is. So again, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting some more organizational advice, but you were just saying, hey, stay true to the character. Don't let this opportunity, because it involves millions of dollars, to change you. And again, I'm so glad that you continue to serve on that board and are able to give me some guidance and to keep me in check with that opportunity. And I realized, the other day when we had the gala, that this has been 10 years that you gave that advice. Then 10 years later, we sit where we are, and things are so much better. But again, having people in your life that can give you that advice is so important, and that more importantly, that you accept it and listen to it.
Yeah, I had suggested that you just be yourself as a trustworthy human being, both competent and of great character, and the details will follow.
What good advice. Well, Craig, I wish you the very best in what lies ahead, and I know we'll have a chance to come back together again, as we have and other times, to share your insights and your thoughts. And if there's anything that you have that's on your heart and mind that you want to share, always feel free to pick up the phone and grab some time to get together and to get back on this platform, because again, I think all you have to share is so very important. And you've touched a lot of stuff: overcoming a divorce, overcoming a career change, overcoming a medical crisis. There's just so much that makes up Craig Piso. So I'd love to have a chance to continue the conversation. So please.
Likewise, it would be a privilege, and I'd enjoy that.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Craig. It's again a pleasure, and I wish you the very best.
You too, Nat. Take care.
Okay. Thanks. Well, gang, that was our show for today. Greg Piso is such a wonderful person. Again, I've known him for several decades. A lot of a story there. I wish I would have remembered to bring out his book. He has a wonderful book. You know what? I will do that. Just hold on one second. Sorry, I can't run as fast as I thought I could. So he has a wonderful book. It's called Healthy Power. I'm covering his name here. That's available wherever you order your books from or get your books from. It's really a very outstanding book. He incorporates a lot of names you've heard. Stephen Covey, Wayne Dyer, over time. And I think his foreword is written by a colleague from the Pennsylvania Psychological Association. So again, it's a really good, and it's a commentary is written on the back of the book by Wayne Dyer. So it's really a good read. And he has a couple other books as well. So again, take some time to invest in yourself, and that's just one way to do it. So again, we're now back. We're now doing our shows Monday at 12 noon instead of 8 p.m. So please note that in your calendar, and hopefully in the future we'll have some guests to call in. But until next week, stay well.